Tonight's show is brought to you by Getting My Life Back, Vendetti Optics, and you, our listeners. Even the nails, I just scratched myself. Wow, that was smart. Tetanus much? What is up, all of you wayward souls, and welcome back to the Wayward Stories podcast. Wayward Stories is the podcast where we tell the tales of our adventures and our wanderings and our wonderings. How's everyone doing tonight? It's been almost a month since I've spoken with you guys. Life's been a little bit crazy. There's been actually a whole lot of stuff going on. As far as housekeeping goes, you guys know the drill around here. If you guys will rate, review, and subscribe, that would be awesome. I would love to see some more reviews on Apple Podcast. We need those. Make sure and share these things with your friends, these videos, if you enjoy them. And you can get in contact with me at mywaywardstory@gmail.com or by going to the website at waywardstories.com. What are we going to talk about tonight? You know what we're going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about me getting a little bit of my life back and going and exploring, just like the good old days, just like the days of yore before I went to school. And now I'm starting to get some time back, and I've gotten to explore. Well, I've got 4 things on the docket for us tonight that I'm really excited to talk to you guys about, because all 4 of them are things that you yourself can come and explore, and they're all really cool, forgotten things that are being taken back by nature out there in the middle of national forest, and all of them have some pretty significant stuff left to go and look at and take pictures of. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. I did want to update you guys on a couple of things. I may have said this in the last episode. I don't remember. I've slept many times in the last month since then, but I did just take over our county search and rescue team along with Zena, my longtime teammate, and we are now the co-coordinators of the county search and rescue team. So that brings a lot of fun responsibility with it, but I'm going to be doing most of the training planning stuff, and she's going to be handling most of the response stuff, because I definitely am not free to just like drop everything and run and respond. But I am free to work on things in the background. And so that's kind of what we worked out. That's kind of what's going on. So that's kind of cool. And in addition to that, I did just get my wilderness first aid certification. I kind of got bum rushed through it. It came out of nowhere at the last minute. And I haven't had to even take my poor long-suffering child with me. I was like, I was going to sell it. I was like, how do you feel about reading The Hobbit for like 18 hours over the weekend? She's like, what? And I was like, I will buy candy, lots of it. What kind of candy do you want? So I sort of bribed her, but I did get my wilderness first aid training done after literally like 9 years of it never falling in line. I've got so much other training. I've got technical rope rescue. I've got a boatload of trainings, but when you're busy and a single parent and you work and you go to school and you do all the things, like stuff has to line up just right. And wilderness first aid's a full 2 days, 16-hour class. And it just never fell right. But this time it did. We made it happen. My deputy emergency manager was like, bro, can you do this? You're going to do this. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to do this. And in the end, it's great because I now am wilderness first aid certified. And I would suggest any of you out there, take the time, hunt down a WUFA class. It's like $250. It's a weekend, and it's totally worth it, because you would be surprised how simple it really is and how practical and logical it really is. I never knew this. I hate medical stuff. I'm squeamish. I don't like it. I can do it when I have to do it, and you kind of go into this weird brain mode, like where you just deal with the thing. Like out here in my cognitive mind world, I'm like, I would never be a nurse. I'd never be an EMT. I would never do that purposefully, because I hate seeing people seriously injured. It just hurts every fiber of my own being. But in the moments it happens, you kind of go into airplane mode in a weird sense, and you just do what's in front of you, and it gets done. And then you can deal with the emotionals, whatever psychological fallout later. But it's better to have been able to do the thing to help someone else out in the moment they needed it, and then, clean up the pieces later. So I suggest anyone goes and gets one of those classes because you literally might save someone's life. Like truly. If you're out there and you're active like we all are here, Wayward Stories, all of us wayward souls, you're going to run across something in your life that you need to know some of this information for. I hate to say it that way. It seems kind of nihilistic, but it's going to happen. It's like riding a motorcycle. It's not if, but when. So if you know what to do, the outcomes can be far better for everyone involved, including yourself. You can save a hike or two sometimes when it's not that serious just by having this really simple, practical knowledge that's a lot easier to administer than you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. But anyway, that's what's been going on in my world, along with just being a freaking new park ranger and learning how to get in the groove of a new job and a new career and a new way of being, which in itself is not actually all that easy. But I love my job. It's everything I paid $33,000 for and spent 3.5 years of my life laboring away to get. It's everything I could have ever hoped, and I freaking love it. But other than that, let's get over all of Justin's personal, life adventures that you don't care about. And let's get on with the show that you do care about, because you might go actually do some of this stuff. So over the last few months, I've had more time because I'm not in school anymore to go and do some of the things I love to do, which is go explore. And one of the things that strikes at the very core of who I am is exploring the forgotten stuff. Ever since I was a kid, I would be driving along with my mom or whatever and looking out the side window, and I'd see these buildings back in the woods or a chimney or an old rock wall or an old railroad bed. I've always been fascinated with abandoned railroads. It's like the idea of all the millions of dollars in work that goes into building a railroad only to have it just completely abandoned and forgotten about. There's just something about that. In humans, it's a part of human nature. Otherwise, #urbex, #rurex wouldn't be a thing. People wouldn't go in mass and explore abandoned stuff if there wasn't something mystical, mythical, magical about it. I don't know what it is, but it definitely strikes at my core, and I've been that way my whole life. And I've been able to amass 4 really cool things over the last couple of months. And so that's what we're going to get into tonight. And I think we're going to start with the one that's kind of the biggest mystery to me, but it's not really a mystery, but it's interesting. Up in Northwest Arkansas, in the Ozarks, there is an abandoned railroad, an abandoned rail line, and it was originally called the Black Mountain and Eastern Railroad, and it was incorporated sometime between 1900 and 1916. And then it became the Combs at Cass and Eastern Railway. It's literally just off of the Mulberry River, probably our most popular float river. It's got to be neck and neck with the Buffalo. But God, that thing stays popping, and it's just up from that. And the mountains up there are rugged, and the elevation drops are extreme. And so I was intrigued by this when I learned about it. And so I went to looking, and I did what I always do. I love to research. So I started out by researching maps and what I could find online. And there's not a whole lot. It was incorporated as an idea, like a spur track off of the St. Louis San Francisco Railroad, the Frisco, to exploit the lumber of the Ozark Mountains. And they built a pretty amazing engineering marvel and then lost their butts on it, like immediately, which you might expect when you're putting all this money into infrastructure to log a finite amount of timber. It doesn't seem like it was very well thought out, as it were. But I'm going to read you a few of the details about it, and I'm going to tell you about my explorations to find it, because I've actually made about 4 trips now to try to run it down, because what I'm interested in is what is the original right-of-way. For whatever reason, I want to go walk on it. I want to see it. I want to experience it. And there's some question to me about what the actual original route was from a certain point. When you come down from Combs, which is up there in Northwest Arkansas, it basically, the road you drive on through the mountains all the way down to Ragtown, which, to give you guys kind of a place marker, it's the Ragtown Road the Ragtown Road trailhead for the Ouachita, or the Ozark Highland Trail. There's too many mountains in Arkansas. Sorry. Ragtown Road trailhead for the Ozark Highland Trail. And you'd be traveling east from that trailhead. Is where it gets questionable for me, But from that point north, you're basically driving on the old rail bed, and it's super cool. You can totally tell you can. You can tell when you've got the cuts through the hillsides and then the retaining walls, stacked stone, and you can tell when you're up on an elevated bed. But then you get to the Ragtown Road trailhead, and originally I had thought that it went around the south side of Black Mountain because that's what some of the earliest maps show. It shows this railroad, it wraps around Black Mountain, it follows the bench down, it makes a big kind of what you call a switchback for a railroad's the same for a car or a trail. It makes a big switchback, and then it enters Cass, which is just before you take the turn to go over to, like, say, Bird's Adventure Center, right there at the Cass Job Corps. And it enters Cass from the south, according to every map that's online. And if you go drive that road that follows what I thought was the rail bed, which I did, there are literally cuts through big rock faces that look exactly like, and there's retaining walls, and it looks exactly like you would expect a mountain railroad to look. I've seen them everywhere. The Rocky Mountains, I've seen them in the I've seen them everywhere. It's exactly what you would expect. But here's the mystery. The train trestles are on the north side of Black Mountain, and the road that I'm describing right now, in order for it to enter into Cass from the south, is on the south side of the summit of Black Mountain. So it literally diverges somewhere right about the Ragtown Road trailhead. It either goes to the left and stays south of Black Mountain, or north, or it goes to the right and it wraps around the north face of Black Mountain. The north face is the one that makes the most sense. It's the most practical. It's the best route by far that I know now, because I'd gone in the past and I'd taken the side, 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, this looks right. It tracks right. But why are the train trestles, the abutments for the train trestles, on the other side of this mountain? Because I'm not going to go into all these details and bore you, but there's literally no way it just like bounced back and forth across the mountain. And there is, to my understanding, no way that they built 2 different lines on each side of the mountain. It doesn't track. So if the train trestles are on the north side, then all my suppositions are off, and it doesn't make any sense, and none of the original maps are right. They're all wrong, because the one that comes down from the north side of Black Mountain enters Cass from the north, not from the south. Anyway, I went and ground truthed that today. So I'm going to give you an idea of what I learned today and what the Ozark Highland Trail is like coming down from the north side of Black Mountain. Before I do that, though, let's talk about the Combs, Cass, and Eastern Railway and tell you a little bit about it. It has several distinctions. This is from the Encyclopedia of Arkansas and from the Shiloh Museum of Ozark History. I kind of took it from 2 locations. It was the last railroad built in northwest Arkansas. It reached the highest elevation of the railroads operating in northwest Arkansas, and it was the sole standard gauge logging railroad in the region. Construction of the then unnamed railroad began in 1913 at Combs in Madison County on the St. Paul-Madison branch of the St. Louis and San Francisco Railway. The line headed south along Mill Creek for nearly 9 miles. Upon entering Franklin County, the railroad encountered difficult rock conditions as it climbed to summit at about 1,900 feet above sea level, which is when it became the highest elevation of any railroad in northwest Arkansas. 4 long wooden trestles were required to cross the canyons. 1 trestle was on land in the Ozark National Forest, and that required it to be incorporated on a condition of leasing. The name selected was Black Mountain and Eastern, and then it was renamed as the Combs, Cass, and Eastern Railway in 1916. The largest trestle, located 12.8 miles south of Combs, was 385 feet long and 77 feet high. The slow construction process ended when it reached a place called High Cass, 540 vertical feet above the community of Cass, and it was reached in late 1916. The completed line was 16 miles long. The railroad built a Y with a set of 3 switches and tracks so that the line's single Frisco steam engine could reverse direction and head back to Combs. It ended up never making any money. It had all these switchbacks, all this money, all these railroad trestles, all these abutments built through some of the most rugged mountain terrain you can imagine, and it never, ever covered its operating expenses. It never made its money back. But it left behind some vestiges of its existence, and that's where I come into this picture, because I like to go out here and find these nerdy things and try to go out there and find like railroad spikes, because I like to try to collect these little railroad spikes from each place that I can find an old railroad that's been abandoned. Unfortunately, I did not find a railroad spike from this one. But anyway, I made 2 or 3 trips out. I've ground truthed it mostly in the summer. That's why I didn't hike the trail sooner. It's because I like winter much better. Less snakes, less ticks, less chiggers, less poison ivy, oak, sumac, all the stuff that sucks. And you can see better because all the underbrush is dead and a lot of the canopy is off the trees and you can just see things better. So anyway, today I set off because it was nice and cold. We're in February and it's probably going to be the last nice cold day of our winter, the way things are looking. And I set off up there to go and try to find the train trestle abutments to satisfy myself that the train was on the north side of Black Mountain. Because again, as I said earlier, everything shows it to be to the south side, but online, on all trails, etc., it's on the north side. So first of all, you guys will enjoy this hike. It's on the Ozark Highland Trail, and you need to know that. But you also need to know that it will kick your butt. It's a pretty serious hike, 591 feet of elevation gain by the time it's done. Most of that's on the way out. You drop down into, because again, you're descending the mountain, obviously, down towards Cass, especially if you're following an old railroad grade. So coming out, it gets real serious. And it's only done in about 3.8 miles, I believe it was. I did it in a couple of hours. It didn't take long, even with me exploring around the trestle abutments and the pilings at the bottom, the piers. But man, 600 feet of elevation, basically 60-story building in a mile, and just over 1.8 or 9 miles coming out. It kicked my butt. But it's a great hike, and big props, big shout out to the Ozark Highland Trail Association. Those guys get busy, man. Like there was, I bet, 3 or 4 dozen trees that were blown down across the trail through there, and they had gone through with a chainsaw sometime recently and hacked them all to pieces where you could still hike the trail. It was super fresh. It just recently happened. And I mean, that's like mad props. You're hiking down through here with a freaking chainsaw and cutting trees as you go. Like that's brutal work. I've cut many a tree with a chainsaw. Let me tell you, that is brutal work. Imagine hiking with a chainsaw and then doing that all the way down and back out. That's insanity. And so anyway, I definitely appreciate the Ozark Highland Trail Association because they're pretty awesome folks doing that. But so I hike in, and it's a beautiful hike today. It was nice and cold. I saw 2 yellow-tailed hawks, which that was really cool. Saw a bunch of enormous crows. Saw a lot of deer tracks. Didn't see anything else really wildlife related. But when you get down to Train Trestle Falls, okay, first of all, before you get there, about halfway down the trail, you come across one of the big ravines, and you have to kind of skirt around the edge of it. It is washing out. So if you go to hike this, be prepared that there's a place that it's only about maybe 1.5 feet, and I don't mean 12 inches plus 6 inches. I mean one of the widths of your foot and another half that you kind of have to goat trail along for maybe 15 yards, not very far, 30 or 40 feet. But if you slide down, it's a long way down. It's probably 20 to 30 feet, and it probably wouldn't kill you, but it would hurt really bad, and it could possibly kill you if you landed wrong. It's not great. So just keep that in mind. And you know your own hiking capabilities. So like if you ever go to do this, just be prepared. There's a place where it gets a little narrow, a little tight, very tight, on the way down in and coming back out. And it's washing away as it is. And there's a tree about to uproot and come loose. It even had a big crack in the ground. And when it goes, there won't be a trail down to Train Trestle Falls until I don't know how you would get around it, to be honest, because I was looking over the hillside there. It's extremely steep. I thought, well, when this finally goes, you'll just have to kind of do a little rock climbing up around it, a little scrambling. And I looked up the hill and I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if there's going to be anything there to really work with. This may permanently close that part of the trail, and you'll have to do something a little more funky to get through it. We'll see. We'll see what happens because it's going. It will go. Probably with the next super heavy rain, the way it was looking. But anyway, I got down to Train Trestle Falls. No idea how tall it is. The Train Trestle Falls, like there's no way to approach it from another angle to get a really good look at it and judge its height as far as a drop, the fall itself. but I would say at least 30 to 50 feet. You know how hard it is to judge. Like if you guys have ever gone bluff jumping or jumping off of bridges into lakes and creeks and stuff, we did that in redneck land. That was something we used to do as kids. Really stupid stuff. But a 20-foot jump, when you're on top of it, looks like 100 feet. Like I'm not even really exaggerating. It looks like a mile down to the water, and it's literally only like 2 stories. Not that big a deal. Totally survivable, right? So I don't know how far it was because I couldn't even get a really good angle on it to see it, because basically this train trestle crosses right at the edge of the falls, and everything around it's gone. It's like a giant grotto. Like it's a big shelf that's fallen away into the valley. And I have no idea how far it is, but I'm guessing, trying to be conservative, 40, 50 feet. But it would not shock me if I were below it going, this thing's 110 feet tall. It's wildly, but I'm thinking 40 or 50 feet. Probably beautiful. The water was running pretty good today. It's probably beautiful, but I don't know how you would access it to get a picture of it. It's just like this hidden enormous waterfall out there in the middle of nowhere that you can only see from the top side, far as I can tell. Not without maybe a little rappelling gear. Not that you would have to rappel, but at least to get down the incline and back up it. I don't think you could do it unassisted anywhere close anyway. But the train trestle itself, it was there. The trestle's gone. They take up that kind of stuff. You know, when someone goes into receivership, when it goes into bankruptcy, like they take up all the rails and they scrap them to get some of the money back, you know, that's owed to the lenders and the creditors. But the abutment's there, and buttloads. Abutment is there, as well as buttloads of iron, like mooring bolts, and not mooring bolts, but lag bolts. Things that would have anchored the trusses into the cement piers that were poured onto the bedrock, literally right where the waterfall's pouring over. And then there was a big rock hand-stacked retaining wall up a little ways. This was probably the highest of the trestles. I don't want to say probably. I'm always wrong about stuff like that, but it was clearly way the heck up there. When that trestle was there, because I did climb up the other side and get to the top where it would have started to cross, it had to be. I mean, what did it say that the tallest trestle was? It was way up there. It had to be every bit of that high or close to it. Like, it was really, really wild. So now, though, I have found this. It's really cool. You guys can hike down there. You need to go down there. You need to go hike down there and see it. But now, like, the mystery deepens, because I'll be honest with you, I could not see any way, shape, or form, being a nerd, being a railroad nerd, having chased down tons of railroads in the mountains and things, abandoned stuff like this. It makes no sense to me why it was built on this side of the mountain. That's some of the roughest terrain I've ever seen. And if you drive the actual road I was talking about before on the south side of the mountain, that looks like it was a railroad grade, that has also rock retaining walls and blasted through stone, you know, big, not quite tunnels, but blown right through the side of these giant outcroppings. It looks exactly like a railroad grade. It's built like a railroad grade. And even the maps say that it is the railroad grade. 100% show that it is on the south side of the summit of Black Mountain. But the train trestles are on the north side of Black Mountain. No idea how to explain that, except for possibly when they surveyed it, maybe they surveyed that route and for whatever reason changed their minds. There are railroads on maps. I've got a half dozen in my own possession that never existed because the survey was laid and the charter was accepted by the government, but then the money fell through. No one ever, came forward with the funds, like the investors backed out or whatever happened. And it never happened, but it made it onto the maps because everyone's always trying to be Rand McNally, for example. They're a very old, very early map making company in the United States. They're like, oh, we've got the latest information, and they're putting stuff on maps that's not even there yet, just as planned. So it's possible it was planned on the original route, and then they diverged at the last minute and thought this is the better way to do it. And then perhaps the Civilian Conservation Corps, which had a camp at Cass at the bottom of the hill in the 1940s and 50s, was like, hey, but that first survey was a great one for a road, so let's just go build the road there up the mountain. That's very possible. That's actually might be the answer as to why it's on the old maps in that alignment, and it looks like a railroad because a railroad grade is not that much different than a car grade, to be completely honest with you. And if they had already surveyed it and liked it and then abandoned it at the last minute, someone else might have just came along and turned it into a road. And then you might have a way to explain why the heck this here little historical mystery. I don't know. But I did get answers today. I did ground truth it today. And one of the biggest things I took away from that is, I mean, that's really cool. And I'm always blown away by the engineering marvels that people slapped out there in the middle of nowhere to make money. Like capitalist greed knows no end. The things they will do to go and extract resources and exploit them, it never ceases to amaze me. The engineering feats that people pulled off. And that's way back when. We didn't have nearly the technology then that we have now. But the other thing is how fast our mountains in Arkansas eat things. There is nothing left of that railroad. Like, I know that they ripped up the tracks. I know they took the trestles out. Yes. But those piers, oh my God. So many of them that are not on the creek bed, the rock in the creek bed, they're barely visible in places. The earth, the mountain is taking them back. And maybe that's just the case. I bet the Pacific Northwest is a whole lot like that. Anywhere it's like rainforest style, forest. We're not quite rainforest, but we're that sort of temperate. Okay, so it rains a lot in those mountains. We have landslides a lot in those mountains, just like the West Coast does. It essentially what it comes down to, I can go up to Colorado and I can find entire towns still standing in the mountains, and you could probably go in and sleep in one of the buildings at night because of the arid environment. Nothing decays because there's so little humidity or moisture. Here, it's like the mountain just dissolves it. Nature dissolves it. Give nature 100 years and it dissolves anything you put in it. And it's really hard to find even like the littlest vestiges. I walked the first mile and almost the entire trip all the way down to the falls before I saw anything that resembled a railroad right-of-way through the mountains. And that's just blows my mind, because anywhere you go, you can see stuff left over. It just seems like this is almost gone. And I was just thinking about how our mountains just like eat stuff. Just takes it back. The canyon takes back anything that goes into it. But it's really interesting to go see. So you guys need to go out and make that hike and go see the waterfall at Train Trestle Falls and be very careful. It's actually a great trail and well maintained, but there are places that's sketchy just simply because of the circumstance and nothing can be done about it. And down by the Train Trestle Falls, it's extremely sketchy if you climb down to it to get a good look at the piers and the pilings and the things like that. One false move and you would fall 50 to 80 feet, just sheer face drop off. But it's a really fun adventure if you like exploring these kinds of things. Moving on, let's take a commercial break, and then I'll knock out the last couple of three things that we have to talk about. That's a redneckism if there ever was one. Couple of three things. But let's go ahead and take our break for tonight, because I've definitely pushed onto our half hour, and then we'll come back and talk about the Shores Lake CCC camp, also up in the Ozarks, also abandoned, and a whole lot more to look at if you can bushwhack your way back to it. We'll be right back. What is up, all of you wayward souls? I want to tell you guys about our newest sponsor, Vendetti Optics, a brand based right here in the good old US of A, Portland, Oregon, to be exact. And I bought my first pair of Vendetti sunglasses about 1.5 years ago and fell in love with them, so much so that I got online and ordered a couple of more pair. And when I did, there was a small shipping snafu, an order fulfillment snafu, and I got on the phone, gave him a call, and guess what? I get a call back from who? One of the big men themselves, right there in Portland, from the top of the chain. Have a great conversation, and we end up starting this great relationship we have. They more than made right the little snafu that occurred, and I am now a huge proponent of them because I can tell you from personal experience they are good people, and they're trying to compete with the big boys out there coming in at a price point of about $40, but using the exact same frame material, TR90, and the same polarization process as the big guys. As it turns out, something I think we are already probably knew in our hearts, when you buy big name sunglasses, you're buying a big name, not necessarily any more quality than you can get somewhere else, like at Vendetti Optics. They have 29 different styles, They have multiple polarization options for whatever climate you happen to live in. And they back it up with like this lifetime guarantee that if your dog eats your sunglasses, it doesn't matter how you break them, send it back in with a check to cover shipping and handling, and you're golden. You got a new pair on the way. These guys are truly trying to do it right, and they have this philosophy that a really good pair of sunglasses should not cost you so much that you are afraid to wear them. And I think all of us outdoorsmen can relate to that. So if you guys, like me, are very practical and like to get more bang for your buck and wear some great looking sunglasses, check out BendettiOptics.com. That's BENDETTI optics.com, or you can go over to Instagram/BendettiOptics. And that I highly suggest, whether you buy a pair or not, just to check out the cutest pupper you'll ever see modeling sunglasses. Once again, that's BendettiOptics.com, and make sure and let them know Wayward Stories sent you. And welcome back. Thank you guys for sticking around through our sponsor break. Let's talk about the Shores Lake CCC camp. There was a boatload of CCC camps, Civilian Conservation Corps, throughout the United States. Arkansas had a boatload in its own right. But the one we're going to talk about tonight is the one that was at Shores Lake, which is still a recreation area up in the Ozarks. People go there and camp every summer to this day. And the men that worked at this CCC camp built the bridge to build the lake and improve the roads around it, and build, not the bridge, the dam to build the lake, and bridges around the dam and the roads around the dam, and made basically the campground to have this recreation area up in the mountains. Now, what was the Civilian Conservation Corps? A lot of people know, a lot of people don't, as I've recently found out when I posted that video on YouTube, the experiential video, which if you go look at our experiential videos, you'll see what I'm about to tell you about. I took some pretty good footage of it. To set it up for you, the Wall Street stock market crash of 29 was the main catalyst that ushered in the United States into the Great Depression. At the height of the Depression, approximately 25% of Americans were unemployed, and the people that were employed were underpaid. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt won the presidency in 32, took office, and he started putting together this thing called the New Deal. And what was in the New Deal was a whole bunch of political stuff, and it was actually quite effective from a historian's point of view. From a political point of view, people like to argue about this, but functionally, it worked really well. It's a brilliant idea. Oh, we're falling apart, so instead of just giving people money for nothing, well, let's give people jobs, and let's make those jobs matter. Let's build recreation areas. Let's improve highways. Let's build high schools and libraries. Like, it was literally building infrastructure for the country and paying people to do it instead of just giving the money away. And it worked surprisingly well, I guess. To some people it was surprising. To me, it's like super logical, and it worked really well. But one of the earliest work relief things from this New Deal programs was the Civilian Conservation Corps. And it particularly was meant to alleviate unemployment by providing national conservation work mainly for young unmarried men. Projects ranged from planting trees to building parks, flood barriers, handling forest fires, and at its peak, the CCC had 500,000 men employed at any one time, and provided work for a total of more than 3 million men through its 9-year run. Pay rates for employed men was left to the president's discretion and was set at $30 a month, 25 of which went directly to their families. They got to have 5, but they were living at these camps. Despite President Roosevelt having control over so much of the program, such as with the pay, an amendment outlawing racial discrimination was virtually the only congressional limitation on its authority. During the 1930s, segregation was continued and deemed to be appropriate due to the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling of separate but equal in 1896. Therefore, separate colored CCC camps were set up for young African Americans, and by the time the program concluded, there had been approximately 150 camps for the over 200,000 African Americans that had been employed by the CCC. Native Americans were, incidentally, barred from joining the CCC during the start of the program, but this restriction was lifted within a few weeks of the program's conception due to the terrible conditions on the majority of the reservations. So anyway, this program didn't last forever. By the time it was over, it had employed more than 3 million men in 4,500 camps across the country, planted over 3 billion trees, combated soil erosion and forest fires, occasionally dealt with national disasters, helped establish hundreds of parks and recreation areas, many of which in Arkansas became state parks to this day, or have things at those state parks that was built by the CCC. Devil's Den, Petty Jean come directly to mind. Shores Lake, which we're about to talk about, not a state park, but a recreation area, comes immediately to mind. And in the end was actually a pretty darn functional program for relief of impoverished circumstances. The Great Depression, the Dust Bowl came on eventually. Approximately 75% of CCC enrollees worked on projects administered by the Department of Agriculture. They built over 125,000 miles of roads and trails, spent 4 million work days controlling forest fires, established more than 800 parks and recreation areas, and there's currently over 500 CCC-related sites listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So anyway, that is a brief overview of the Civilian Conservation Corps. So where are we going tonight for our little adventure? We're going to the Shores Lake abandoned CCC camp. The way to get there, you go up to Shores Lake in Arkansas, Google it, you'll find it. Find the campgrounds on Google. And I would say, northernmost campground is where you're going to want to go park. I had to park outside the campground because it's closed for the winter and hike through the campground. But once you get to the other side, well, there used to be a trail there. It's not anymore. If you get online, you will be able to find, as I did, where this camp was situated on the eastern shore of Shores Lake, across the creek that feeds into Shores Lake and creates it. But it was kind of a bushwhack. The trail really no longer exists. I don't know how many years, but it seems like it's been at least a few years since anyone has regularly hiked any trail back to find this camp. And I did. I set out a few weeks ago and I bushwhacked my way and waded a little over ankle deep through the creek. And it was like 38 degrees, 35 degrees. And that sucked. But I wasn't very far from the car. It's only like a mile hike in. So you hike in and you get there and there are buildings everywhere, or at least the foundations and the piers and the footings and the fireplaces. They're everywhere. I found so much cool stuff back there. Again, on this very YouTube channel, if you're watching on YouTube, just go over to Arkansas Parks and Rec, that folder, or that playlist on my page, Wayward Stories, and you'll find that video. It's the latest one. Well, it'll be that one or the second latest one, because I may drop my experiential video from today here sometime pretty soon. But you can see footage of it, and it's so cool, man. There's coffee cans, old rusted coffee cans everywhere. These footings for the cabins that they stayed in, the mess hall, clearly the meeting area. There's a big building that is no longer there, but there's footings all the way through it. There's two giant fireplaces on either end of it, way bigger than any of the cabin sites there. And so it was clearly either the mess hall or a meeting hall. And it was so cool. And there was a blown over tree, and I went straight for the root ball. Like, the archaeologist in me is like, oh baby, a root ball right next to a historic site. There's going to be stuff in the roots of that tree that got turned up, and I will be danged if I did not find, like, right almost as soon as I walked up to it, I saw the edge of it. It was a plow point, because they would have had a little garden. They would have plowed for their own food. And I found a plow point right there in the root ball of that tree. And I left it there because it's best practice. Leave it where you found it, right? And I say that, and I'm about to show you something I didn't leave where I found. But best practice, leave stuff where you found it. It's a part of the integrity of the historical aspect of the site for future generations to see and be like, how cool is this? Of course, someone will take it the next time they see it. But whatever. Don't be the person that does the taking. But right there on top of that was this. Here's the thing that I did take. Because it's a boot heel, the heel of an actual boot. And I was like, this looks like something that I could actually research and possibly find out if this is original, because it could be more modern day. Absolutely. It's just the heel of a boot, but you don't often see just the heel of a boot laying by itself. It's been many years since people had, their shoes or their boots reshod. And so that's what this is. So I brought it home and I Googled it, and it has a little emblem right on the bottom. You can see it if you're watching on YouTube. I think the shadows and the relief of the ring light there makes it pretty obvious. You can tell there's a cat there right in the middle, and it says cat's paw. So I Googled that. Sure freaking enough, major supplier of the U.S. government contractor, especially through the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Like, these were on the boots of World War II soldiers. They were on the boots of CCC workers, WPA workers. This is time specific, period specific, and this was on the feet of one of the workers that built Shores Lake, and it was just sitting out there. And I'll tell you what, it sure isn't going away. That's rubber, but it is hard as a rock, baby. Even the nails, I just scratched myself. Wow, that was smart. Tetanus much? Anyway, this is original, and how cool is this? Look at that. That's so cool. But anyway, the CCC camp, there's so much interesting stuff out there that's left. I would say minimum of the foundations that I was able to find, 5 or 6 cabins right next to the creek. There was definitely either a toilet house, shower house, or like a boiler room where they would have boiled water, because it had this weird under basement kind of in it. And then above it, it had all these big holes in the top that probably were for like porta potty type of things. Or again, could have been a boiler system. I've seen buildings like that before. And over on the east shore of the lake, because the camp's kind of an L shape, I found that giant meeting house or mess hall. And then I found like 3 or 4 more cabins that were actually cut back into the hill. And I was like, those guys, they had it made. That would have been the view, man. You'd have been coming home every night, looking across, and you're right by the mess hall too. You get out of the mess hall and you go sit on the porch of your little cabin, and you're looking out across the valley, and you can see the dam you're building at the end of the valley in the distance. Man, that would have been so cool. Now, the work would have been hard as hell. That would have sucked. It wouldn't have been super fun. Those men were men. But it would have been a really cool view and a really cool cabin to have. And so this whole thing collectively combined is one of the best preserved of at least the foundations of any CCC camp I have yet stumbled across in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the wilderness. And it's probably because it's not easy to get to. You do kind of have to wade across the creek, and depending on the level of the creek, that could be a bit of a pain in the butt or bar your entry depending on if it's very high. And I don't know how many people even know it's there, really. You've got to work a little bit for it, especially now. It was a thing for me. It beat me up pretty good. I ripped half my dang hand off on a set of briars out there. Like, it's a full true bushwhack right now. And it was 1st of February when I did this, middle of winter. The foliage is off the trees. A lot of the stuff is dead, and the underbrush was still that thick. So it was brutal. It was kind of brutal, but it was totally worth it. And again, go check out that video if you get the chance. And Shores Lake itself is super cool. You can go explore around it. You can hike down below the dam and get some really cool pictures of the dam. That's on my Instagram as well. I did get a good long exposure of the dam from below it that day. And that's Instagram / Wayward Son 119, and you can go see that. It is really cool, man. It was really, really, really cool, and it's something you can totally do. And if you're much into camping, it's a great place to go park your RV or park your tent in the summer when they're open. I know people that do it to this day, and it's a neat little recreation area. They have a swimming hole. You can fish there. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. All right, well, so now we've got Shores Lake under our belt, and that's totally explorable for you. We have got the Combs Cass and Eastern Railway, formerly Black Mountain and Eastern, which is really cool. And go drive that too. I don't think I mentioned. Go up there and drive the road. I said drive, I believe it's actually White Rock Mountain Road. It's the one that I believe was an original either surveyed grade or could have been the grades, what I believe, for a long time. That's a fun drive going up. And there's also like an eye of the needle type of formation up there right off the edge of the road with a rock that's kind of got a needle shaped hole in it. And the blast, it's a really, really awesome dirt road drive. It's dirt roading at its finest, back roading. So go do that. Take that drive and hike down the Ragtown Road section of the Ozark Highland Trail. Like, it's a fun adventure in its own right. This is a fun adventure in its own right. But now let's do a drivey adventure. Let's do a little bit less hiking and let's do some driving. And this one's fascinating. And I mentioned this in a previous episode a couple of years ago, but I had not explored it fully then. I have now, and that is the $1 Million Highway down in the Ouachita Mountains off of Highway 28, going to be south and east of Waldron, Arkansas. And this one was really interesting. The way I found this one was interesting. This was my early days at Big Purple. I was FedExing out there in my little scooter van, and I had a couple of stops up off of Little Texas Road, and the easiest way to get to Little Texas Road was to go up $1 Million Highway a couple of miles and then cut off down Little Texas. And I thought, how weird. $1 Million Highway, this dirt road, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of national forest, very little private land holdings out here. What the hell does this mean? Is this just some like clever play on words? You see people with their, vanity signs up and, for their roads or whatever. And I get there first time and I'm like, nope, that is it says $1 Million Highway. That's a state sign for sure. And I go driving up the road, and right before I get to $1 Million Highway, I see an old highway sign. This is a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, and I see an actual highway sign. And I was like, how weird. So anyway, that intrigued me for a long time. There's very little information about it. And you go Google, you know what you're going to get, $1 Million Highway in Colorado. Good luck finding anything on Arkansas's $1 Million Highway. Not even remotely the same thing. But I did find one hint, and I can't even remember now where I found it when I printed this off 2 months ago when I was starting to compile towards what I knew would eventually be this episode. So I'm going to read this to you real quick. This is what makes it fascinating. The story of the $1 Million Highway is an interesting one for sure. It has been told to us by our brother-in-law, whom I don't know who the hell that is. And I don't know who the people that posted this is. I don't remember where I found it. In the 1970s, he was employed as a surveyor for Weyerhaeuser, which is a lumber timber company. A lot of people just call it Weyerhaeuser, but it's properly Weyerhaeuser. When the U.S. government representatives whirled in and told everyone they were going to build a superhighway to access the lumber available in the area. This superhighway was to be formed with 12-inch thick asphalt and fancy high traffic bridges. As you travel this highway, you will find little evidence of the 12 inches of asphalt that it has gone to pot over the last 2 years. This must have been a long time ago. It's been to pot a lot longer than 2 years ago. The bridges are still evident, but you may be in for a bumpy ride and have a job dodging some of the holes. This highway begins in nowhere and it ends in nowhere. What a strange place for a superhighway. Oh, and it is reported that the road cost $1 million to build. Okay, $1 Million Highway off of Highway 28. It's near Bluffton, south and east of Waldron. As I said, go drive this. You'll enjoy it. If you have an even remotely capable car, it's not even really a four-wheel drive road. You could do it in a family car, though I would prefer to have four-wheel drive and a little bit of ground clearance just so you don't knock a hole in the oil pan with a rock or whatever. But I finally went and explored. Y'all, I drove the whole thing, and it comes out on, and the episode I think I'm referencing from the past was Backcountry Byways. If you go find that, you're going to hear me talk about taking some road called Bluff Road and maybe the Chula Road, Highway 314. It's all down in that area. And I mentioned $1 Million Highway, but at that time I had never driven $1 Million Highway all the way up. So I went back just a couple of months ago and I explored it. And it's so cool. The further you go, the more you see, and there's more highway signs, and there's the railings, the guardrails that go along the side. There are absolutely big, tall concrete bridges, just like would be on a highway. I say tall, big ones over big creeks in the middle of nowhere, goes nowhere, used for nothing. It's fascinating. I was climbing out and looking around at one point, and I found an old glass Mountain Dew bottle that's easily from, I would say, the 70s, 70s to 80s, which actually tracks because on one of the bridges stamped into the concrete, it says 1972, which makes sense to everything I've been able to find, which is so scantily little. But how cool. Someone built a highway to nowhere, and apparently not a damn thing came of it except there's a highway out there in the middle of nowhere. Now it is a gravel road where asphalt does show through occasionally. The concrete bridges are all there and in fine shape. Like, here, let me put it in perspective for you. You guys are like, that still looks 60 years ago. Yes, it is, 50 years ago. But most of the highway bridges you drive across today, anywhere in this country, that are still being used today on state highways anywhere were built in the 1970s at the same time this one was. 100%. So this is actually a modern highway, or it was. And that's what makes it so interesting, is the juxtaposition of all these little vestiges of a state highway, not a interstate, a state highway through the mountains somewhere, are still there in the form of faded road signs and guardrails and big concrete bridges, but the road you're driving on is dirt and there's nothing there. There's no houses, there's no gas stations, there's nothing. It's so weird, but so cool at the same time. And it connects to Bluff Road, which is where I was going with that earlier. And you can take Bluff Road all the way back up to Highway 28, and it's not a bad drive. And you see all these abandoned houses. Once you get onto Bluff, you start seeing abandoned houses in the middle of the woods. There was a whole community of something back there at some point. Not a big one. It was a rural community, but there was a community of people that lived back there at some point. Their stuff's rotting into the ground in the middle of the woods. This road's rotting into the ground in the middle of woods. It goes nowhere. It's a great backcountry drive. There's a little store up in Plainview that makes banging Crispitos. I was starving that day. That Crispito was freaking killer. It just was. Like, listen, I know this is peak middle age, but when you find a really good Crispito in the world, you appreciate it. You understand that? And it was a really good Crispito. It hit just right that day. And the road trip that day hit just right. There's not much better than spending a whole day driving around in the backwoods and just exploring and finding all these things. And who finds an abandoned road in the middle of nowhere? Like I said, look online for it. You can't find anything about it. I clearly found something, but I don't even remember how many pages deep I was off of the main, Google front page before I found this little snippet. And I believe it was from a post, if I'm not mistaken, like a thread from the early to mid 2000s when we didn't even have like Reddit yet. People weren't even using the internet like we use it today. You still had like message boards type of stuff. And that's where I'm pretty sure this came from, was one of those old message boards. So that's really wild. But let's move on from that, because I have one more thing that I want to tell you about. Super cool. This is also down in the Ouachita Mountains. We kind of split it up good tonight. We got 2 things in the Ozarks, 2 things in the Ouachitas. And the last one, I think that you will also enjoy. It's a really cool driving trip with just a little bit of hikiness in it. And I was a little bit blown away because I had explored this way back in the past in my FedEx days too, a little bit, but didn't realize how much more there was being swallowed by the forest around it. And what this place is called Old Forester, and it's actually off of Highway 28 as well. And Old Forester was a logging community, and it's crazy. I'm just going to read this to you, and then I'll tell you about exploring it. If you're very much a nerd like me, the way that I came across this is I started seeing things that look like an abandoned railroad bed out there. And then I found out there was one because it went to this old community of Forester, and there's actually something you can go see in Forester. So if you want to go and do the most adventure-y part and actually drive most of the old railroad bed to Old Forester, you start in Waldron, Arkansas, and you take Highway 80. You will reach a point where there's a road called Manor Crest Road, Manorcrest, Manor Crest. That's the old railroad. And you could actually, 5 years ago, I don't know about now, but 5 years ago, you could see where the railroad that extended out from Waldron hit its terminus right there at Highway 80. But you could tell it crossed over the Highway 80 at some point and became Manor Crest. That was also one of the early little indicators. But if you take Manor Crest and follow it all the way to Highway 250, Highway 250 all the way to Scottsboro Road. Take Scottsboro Road until it turns into Tram Road. That's important. Tram, railroad tram. And then follow Tram to Brush Creek. And essentially you just drove the railroad line that they had extended across the mountain to get down into the Fush-Lafave River Valley to go back to Old Forester. Then you end up back on Highway 28 and you're no longer on the railroad line. But when you hit the dirt road to go to Forester, and there are signs down there, and if you put it in Google Maps, it will take you, you end up back on the railroad grade. And if you're looking off in the field to your left, there's a couple of places you can actually see some of the early timber trestles. So anyway, Forester, middle of nowhere, literally middle of nowhere. Self-contained sawmill town owned by the Caddo River Lumber Company, built by Thomas Whitaker Roseboro in 1930, southeastern Scott County. The mill became the largest and most productive in the state, with its huge lumber shed measuring 80 feet wide by 1,000 feet long and storing millions of board feet of kiln-dried planed lumber. The company town was named after Waldron businessman Charles A. Forester. That's actually surprises me. I thought it was because there was foresters out there, loggers doing foresty stuff. Don't ever assume, people. Don't ever assume. So, named after Charles Forester, just a interesting coincidence. Contractors used mule teams and wagons until 1940, and that's when the company purchased trucks. After all the largest timber was cut, Caddo River sold the town of Forester to Dirk's Lumber Company and Coal in 1945, and the company continued to operate until there was insufficient timber for a mill of its size. The town was laid out in sections rather than streets. The main part was known as Greentown, and the second largest was called Angeltown. There was also Cannontown, Water Tank Road, the section houses, and Happy Holler, the smallest section. The population of Forester in 1940 was 1,300 people. That's mind-blowing, including about 350 black residents living in their own section of rustic red-stained houses called the quarters. They had their own school, church, and an entertainment center called the Barrel House, but shared the store, post office, and theater with white residents. That's actually kind of shocking because segregation was totally still a thing then. In South Arkansas, definitely. But anyway, the company provided houses, schools, churches, a theater, a post office, a drugstore, a barber, a beauty shop, a 28-room hotel. Dear God, 28-room hotel, a depot, a garage with car sales, a ballpark and a stadium, a community hall and a Masonic lodge, and the company store. Forester had its own water system and power plant, and there was free health care for all provided by a company-paid doctor. Forester had very little crime and only employed 2 town marshals in the 20 years of its life. In 1952, the mill closed down and the whole town was moved or torn down, being sold to various companies and individuals. This forced the people to relocate and seek employment elsewhere. Many sawmill towns in Arkansas have shut down over the years, but Forester is the only one known to have its people return year after year for a reunion. So, people apparently still return. This was written quite a while ago, and I don't know that they still do, and if they do, I don't know how big in numbers, because a lot of those people would have passed by now. But you go out, you drive all the roads I just told you, you find yourself at Old Forester, or you can just go down to 28 and go to Forester, and you'll see the mill pond. You can't miss it. You'll go down to the mill pond, and you can see some of the mill building that's still left right there on the edge of the mill pond, and you can walk over and explore it. You can dig through all the bricks. We were digging through all the bricks and looking at the names on the bricks. And where they were from, Bellefontaine, Missouri kept showing up. That's St. Louis. St. Louis was in there as well. Bellefontaine's like a sub-neighborhood of St. Louis these days. Well, they call it Bellefontaine, but it's Bellefontaine. Anyway, you can hike this trail. I'd seen that part in the past, the mill pond, and I was like, well, that's cool. Look, there's a little piece of a building left in a mill pond. How interesting. But that was like in the summer. This is 5 years later. I went back in the dead of winter with some of my park homies, and we went to explore, and it's winter, so it's much safer to get out in the stuff, as it were. And there's a hiking trail, and you take the hiking trail, and suddenly you see this giant thing out there in the woods being eaten by the woods, and what it was the kiln, like the drying shed, and it was enormous. And you can see, like, I don't know what it just said, how many, 1,000 feet by whatever, but it was an enormous shed, and it had all these piers, like these footings for the drying shed part. And it's eerie because they look like a little cemetery, like a little bunch of headstones out there. It's fascinating to look at, but you look beyond those, and those go in forever, like hundreds of yards around, like in hundreds of square yards, like probably 100 yards across, 200. It's enormous. And then you see all these giant walls that have collapsed in on themselves, and they're collapsing all over each other. And we went and explored all over those as best we could without getting killed. And that blows my mind too. That's only been 75 years ago. why did those walls collapse? It literally looks like it blew up. Like, it makes you wonder if they knocked it down on purpose for some reason. Um, or if the forest and the mountains are really just that insidious when they go to take back what's theirs and return everything to nature. But that was so cool. And this, you get down there and you look around and you realize all around you is this enormous town being swallowed. Now, I mean, there's not buildings out there anymore. Like, there's crumbling, the walls of that still sort of look like a building, but it's not like all the houses there. It just said most of it was sold off. But the foundations, the footings, the roads, the layouts, the grids, like there's wells at certain junctions. We saw some of those, and it's like you realize there was a whole city built on the side of this little, not the side of the mountain. There is a big hill there, but it's like built right into this thing. There was 1,300 people there with all these buildings, like a actual functioning little town. And all that remains today is a mill pond and a partial building there, and the rest of it is hiding in the forest around it. And that was awesome. We crawled around in there as long as we could. We even found a bear claw, like a shed bear claw. I didn't. One of my ranger buddies did, but we found a shed bear claw. How trippy is that? Like, and you drive most of the way there. There's very little walking, and then you're just like bushwhacking in the woods to find the old drying shed and all that stuff. It was really cool, man. So Old Forester, put it on your list. If you're in Arkansas or anywhere close, you ever take a trip to Arkansas and you want to get out and find some of the stuff no one else sees, no one else knows about, no one else thinks about, and get out of, I mean, for a change, it's fun to go hike to Hawksbill. Sure, it's fun to go do all the stuff everyone does. But if you want to go do the stuff that like sets my soul on fire, the stuff no one does, try to find the things that no one else remembers or knows about, these are 4 great places to start. We have definitely pushed past our hour tonight, so I think we're going to wrap it up here, guys. I think this should be an interesting episode. I'm going to have some editing difficulties because I've had some phone recording difficulties and also cat difficulties, which you may hear some of early in this. I'm going to get on into editing this and get it out to you guys so I can get back to all the other crap I really need to be doing. You guys get out there, find something to explore, send me an email about it, mywaywardstory@gmail.com. Head over to waywardstories.com, check out social media, anything else I've got there. But until we meet again, whenever that might be, with whatever story that I have to bring you, we'll see what the universe holds in store over the next several weeks. You guys, especially in these trying times, remember to be good to each other.